I try and squeeze in a day, like every now and then, just so I can do all my washing
Ellie,
while I'm
Okay.
working.
can
That's what
you
I'm
can
doing
you
right now.
two hear me?
Good.
Can you
Oh,
two hear? Can you hear me?
No,
we
you're
can.
not very loud.
Yeah, you're not very
Not very
loud.
loud. We can hear you both very loud. So,
Oh,
no,
Oops.
I know, I could see where it was
I
going.
can't hear
It's
you
a
at all.
career-ending conversation. I'm joking. You're both the height of professionalism. Thank you very much for joining us as well. I'm not even hosting this thing, so I'm going to shut up and let Paul take over. Hello. Thank you both for coming.
Right,
Ellie.
okay, so for our final session during the day here on the first day of Journalism Week, we have a panel from NewsUK. So we're very pleased to have Mark Hudson, who's the Head of Creative Diversity at NewsUK. We've also got Ellie Henman, who's the Deputy Showbiz Editor at The Sun, and Georgia Lambert, who's a health reporter at The Times. And we're hopefully going to tell you a little bit about NewsUK and the business, and also talk a little bit about how to get in, because as I'm sure you're all obviously doing your journalism degrees at the minute, at some point you might want
Oh,
to
I'm
go and work for
struggling.
some of the fantastic brands that they've got down in London. So Mark, if you don't mind starting, do you mind telling me a little bit about the company and how it all fits together?
Yeah. Has anyone heard of News UK? Yes. Okay. Good. Because you're all journalism students, and that's brilliant. But lots of people haven't. But lots of people have heard of our titles. So News UK is the umbrella company, and we have The Sun, The Times and Sunday Times. We also have our broadcasting wing, which includes Times Radio, TalkSport, Virgin Radio, and Talk TV. And lots of you saw Piers and his talk earlier today. So it's also a big company that has HarperCollins, a book publisher. Is part of News Corp as well. Rupert Murdoch, or no longer Rupert Murdoch because he stepped down, but the Murdoch family's American and Australian businesses as well. So Dow Jones has an office at our place, but our UK stuff covers most of those titles. So there is always a lot of exciting things going on. And then within each of those titles, there are various departments such as health, where Georgia works, or showbiz on The Sun is an enormous department, of which Ellie is the deputy editor. And there's Sunday Times Style magazine, there's Fabulous magazine, there's various sports sections. So always lots going on. It's quite an exciting place to be. There's always celebrities and politicians coming in and out. And yeah, it's really, really fun place to work.
And I know a big part of your job over the last few years has been recruitment. So what are the kind of things that you are wanting to see from young journalists, and obviously what these two have managed to do in terms of being able to show people that they're ready for an opportunity working for News UK?
Yeah, I wanted Ellie and Georgia to be here, and thank you very much for being here, both of you as well. I wanted them both to be here. Georgia is now a junior health reporter on The Times, which is a very prestigious title and position, but very recently came through one of our apprenticeships. So she's someone who very recently has gone through the application process. And Ellie, I think, will give you some insights into, for a lot of people, being a showbiz reporter is the dream job. And there are a few of these dream jobs around. Like for some of you, you want to be a sports journalist, or you've just heard from investigative reporters. So I thought Ellie would be a great person to ask about how to get that dream job in particular. But in a broad sense, so my job now is head of creative diversity. I was head of early talent for the last 3 years. And so I still keep an eye on it, and I see about 1,000 applications per year, probably more. I think we've just done we've got 21 apprenticeships live, and we've had something like 2,000 applications. And there's a very, very simple way to stand out, okay? I think that we're looking for 3 things in particular. One is that you are hardworking, and you can demonstrate that by perhaps you've had to have a job while you've been studying, or you've had a Saturday job since you were a kid and stuff like that. Like, tell that story. That's good. Work experience is another way as well to show that you are hardworking, okay? Passionate about the media industry, and that's where your work experience comes across loud and clear. So for many of you, you may well have done some work experience on your local newspaper. For those of you that have struggled to get work experience, there's nothing stopping you starting a YouTube channel or a TikTok channel where you do one of those things where you put the green screen behind you and talk about stories. Just showing your passion and sort of copying what some of the pros are doing is a really, really great way to communicate your passion for this journalism industry. And the last thing that we're looking for is passion for wherever you're applying for in particular. So many people fall down in their application process or in the job interview because they haven't read that day's newspaper or they haven't listened to that day's broadcast. And so if you're in an interview and I say, what did you think about today's front page? And you're like, oh, I don't know, I didn't read it. That already makes that quite difficult. So even if you're lying, wherever you're working to, just be really, really passionate about what they do, because these two and all of our journalists work really, really hard at their craft, and they really care about the product they produce, and they want to know that you care about it too. Okay, you're not, when you're starting as a junior, you're not expected to be the finished article. We know that we're going to have to mold you into the shape we want you to be, but what you can't teach is hard work and passion, and those are the things that you need to communicate in your applications, I think.
Great. And just coming to you a sec, Ellie, can you tell us a bit about your process of getting started and how you found the job now that you've got into it? And obviously you've got a lot of responsibility there on the showbiz desk, so how do you manage all of that?
I know, it's terrifying. I don't know why they give me any responsibility. No, do you know what? My biggest mistake, I went to Leeds too. You're in the best city in the world as far as I'm concerned. And the best universities there. But one thing I really let myself down on at uni was work experience. I barely did any. And because I did a broadcast journalism career, I was convinced that somehow this would sort of just see and sail me off. And obviously I missed those golden years and where you could just do that degree and walk into a job. It didn't exist. So when I came out into employment, I found it really, really difficult. And basically, when I finished university, I ended up doing any sort of paid internship I could, whether it was in communications or journalism. And I applied for the Sun endlessly and I kept getting rejected. And in the end, I was lucky enough that someone I knew came and worked here who put in a word for me so I could get my foot through the door. But pre that, it was genuinely just applying for jobs and trying to put across the passion I had. I started off in real life and features, and that was where, you know, my passion lay until I sort of moved off into celebrity and I sort of fell into the celebrity world, and that sort of became, you know, where I settled and where they sort of kept me, and I've really thrived here. But for me, yeah, getting that work experience in early doors was key because, my God, like I was an idiot. I literally look back now and I did like bits and bobs, but I had some friends of mine who were really serious about it, and I just enjoyed university far too much. And just worked in the bar far too long when I actually probably should have been getting some experience on the ground. But when I came into the Sun, it's somewhere I've always wanted to work, and just sort of being inspired by the amazing people I work with every day and how hard they work, because it is incredibly hard work. And there's a new guy who's joined our team recently, and he turned around to me the other day and he just said, I don't know how you fit it all in, because we have our first morning meeting every day at 10:30. So we sort of expect your ideas over by then. He said, I don't know how you fit it in. And I was like, it's just about trying to work cleverly. So there are so many hours in a day. I was like, so it's more shifting your life to work around those hours. So I think that's the one thing in this job. It isn't a 9 to 5. Unfortunately, my job is 7 days a week, 365 days a year. For example, when George Michael died, I was in the office by myself. And I remember the news editor shouting it across at me. And at that point, when we found out, it was about 12:30. My shift was meant to be finishing at 1. And I knew that was it, and that it just never ended. So it's, yeah, I think prepare for hard work, but also prepare for like the best job in the world. That's how I feel at the Sun. I don't know if that answered your question. Sorry, I feel like I just took in loads, but
It definitely. Can I
I
just
think hard work is key.
can I piggyback off a point you just made there, Ellie, as well, which is that I think there were two. Well, there's lots of good stuff you just said, but there were two really valuable bits that I've forgotten as well, which is just take any opportunity. Like, there's no hierarchy of how good work experience is when I'm looking at a CV. And so, like Ellie there was saying, I was just taking anything that I could, and that just shows that you're really hardworking and committed. And then the other thing is as well that you know, you never really talk about in these kind of panels, because normally you're hearing from people who have made it, but there is a lot of rejection, like, and that's fine. You keep going, because that rejection carries on throughout your career. Like, Ellie will be pitching ideas to the editor every week, and loads of those ideas will get a no. They're great ideas, it's just that on that day it didn't happen. So whether it's a job application or an idea that you're pitching in conference, like, rejection's part of journalism, and showing that you have the resilience to be able to deal with that and still keep going and still applying is the key to breaking into this industry, I think.
And sorry, just to add, like, not being afraid either of rejection, because rejection, you're going to get so much of it in your life, and it is, like you said, the thick skin you grow and the way you learn from it. And actually, the more you get rejected, the more skilled you become, because you learn why you're getting rejected and you work out how to stop. So actually, rejection is good. But yeah, keep bang on doors, be heard. And like, I think the idea of sort of going onto TikTok and using that and using social media in the way that I didn't, I graduated in 2010, when social media was up and coming, but it's not what it is now. And I'd like to think if I was your guys' age, I'd be doing something incredibly similar. And I will shut up in a second so Georgia can speak. But the one thing I would say, and I say this at every panel I do, my job especially, we live off tips. So, and famous people, things you see online, anything like that. And I always say, if you ever get a tip, good showbiz tip, or you spot something online, get in touch. We will pay you. You are students. You are probably poor. We will pay you for your tips. And it's the cleverest way to get a foot in a door with a journalist is to send them ideas. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Because if that's what you're interested in and that's the way you want to work, just start tipping. And I sort of was told that early on in my career when I finally got my first job in magazines. And I remember my editors just being like, if something doesn't work for us, like, make sure you just tip it to a national. And I'd never really thought about it. And actually, it's something I always say. If you see something or a trend, or you hear of a story you think's a good story, find someone in a national newspaper and talk to them about it. And if they know you're a journalism student and it comes off and you help them work on it, or you put the idea to them, you're more than likely going to get a byline. They'll also remember your name because you're the only person that got in touch. And I do so many talks, and I can count on two hands the number of people who've got in touch after and done it. I just think, do it. If you're a journalist and that's what you want to do, you are socially aware, you do see things, you do hear things. I think it's always so worth it. Yeah, get in touch with people, because it's such a good way to get your name known. And then if I then know you want work experience or you're looking for something, I will get you in, we'll help you. I just think don't be afraid of reaching out to people and getting in touch. So, and I'll get back in my box now. Sorry.
No, that's and the tip line, Ellie, is on the Bazaar page, isn't it? There's a thing that says if you've got a story. So if you just buy a paper,
get in touch. That's a great bit of advice. Yeah.
And just moving on to you then, George. I mean, how did you find the process of getting in, and obviously working in an area that's highly specialist now? How have you managed to develop your skills in terms of covering health?
Hang on, Georgia, we've got a sound problem. You might need to start again. Sorry. You've muted your mic. Sorry.
You would think, after all of these years doing Zoom and virtual, that I would learn, but no. Sorry. So what I was saying was I came to journalism a little bit different to Ellie. I dropped out of university for a health condition, and was kind of a little bit stuck as to what to do. So I ended up in marketing, just traditional marketing that took me kind of all over the world. And I ended up living in Ghana just before the pandemic. And I kind of learned, I always knew that I was very interested in communication and writing. So I started a blog. It didn't have very many views. It didn't matter to me. It was just a way of getting to kind of nurture my craft. And after kind of, I think it was like the beginning of the pandemic, I decided to kind of really make a go of it. I think the pandemic kind of shook a lot of things up for a lot of people, including myself. And I just applied on a whim to a press association course in journalism. And bearing in mind, I didn't have a degree, but I did have all of this experience working abroad. And so yeah, that's kind of how I went in, and I met Mark, and like Ellie said, you know, keeping those contacts, and building and building a contact list is really how I got in and stayed in the industry. Throughout my course, I learned shorthand. I carried on using shorthand. I think kind of all of these different skills that you learn that perhaps you wonder whether or not you ever need. You know, the shorthands, and media law, like all of those things that I still refer back to my books to make sure that I'm always on top of it. And yeah, that course kind of led me into meeting Mark, meeting a lot more other journalists that are well more kind of versed in the industry than I was. And yeah, that's kind of how I got in. There was an apprenticeship scheme that was offered, and I finished my course and I went for it and I got in. And I think the kind of the apprenticeship was amazing for me. I was able to go in when I think I was kind of 26, and it kind of allowed me that freedom to be able to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And I think those apprenticeships, I was grappling whether or not I should do them. I thought perhaps I was too old, and looking back, I really wasn't. And yeah, I started on property. I ended up staying on property, writing for Bricks and Mortar and Sunday Times Home for, I think, maybe about a year. And then I got seconded from property after I wrote about my brain condition for the Times. And I got seconded onto the Times Health Commission, which I've been doing now for a year. So it's a year-long look into health and social care in the UK. So that's where I'm working now.
And just to add as well, so on our apprenticeships, which Georgia has successfully completed, you do placements on different desks. So you'll do like 3 months on one desk and 3 months on the other. And during that time, it allows us to find out where your strengths are and learn a little bit more about what you're passionate about. But also, like Georgia says, gives you the chance to kind of figure that out. Because I think there's a lot of expectation that you'll know what you want to be now, and you know, perhaps you don't. I went into this industry convinced I was going to be a sports journalist, but then I did my apprenticeship 100 years ago, and 18 years ago, and you didn't have to laugh that hard. Yeah, I came in thinking I was going to do sport, and then got a taste of news and fell in love with it, and pretty much stayed in news and features the whole time. So yeah. Georgia, can you remember? So, and also the application process was, we asked a couple of questions, and you did a phone interview, and then there was an assessment centre at the end. What do you think stood out about you? I don't think I've ever asked you this before.
No, I don't think you have, and I can't actually remember much of it. It's a bit of a blur, but I do think across that kind of assessment centre, you really did hammer home, and you were right to do so, the importance of reading the newspaper. It's one of those tips that I didn't think was as important as it ended up being, and kind of getting to know the writers, being able to kind of, if you get into one of these apprenticeship schemes, you will get invaluable experience, not only with your writing, but you'll be able to kind of interact with these writers every single day, and reading the newspaper and just having that insight into what they've written that day will just stand you in the best stead. I think kind of the assessment centre, again, I really don't remember much of it, but kind of reading the newspaper, getting on top of current affairs, reading the people that you like, but the people that the sections of the newspaper that perhaps you don't normally read. That stood me in quite good stead. Yeah, it's Mark, I can't remember it. It was only 2 years ago, but I really don't.
I remember what we saw about you. If this is going to be mortifying. So luckily, you're only on a 50-foot screen while I say this, but Georgia came across as very knowledgeable about the Times, as she mentioned as well, and you were also open. You mentioned brain condition. I don't know how comfortable you feel about talking about that today.
No, of course.
but you were really open about the fact that you are a young journalist who has a disability, and you were passionate about that, and that passion came across loud and clear. And then during Georgia's apprenticeship, she ended up working on the Times Health Commission, which was a major piece of work. That well, in fact, why don't you talk to us about the Health Commission? Sorry, Paul, I'm like totally. It's only because I'm a big fan of both of these people as well, so I'm excited they're here. But tell us about the Health Commission, because I think you brought a very unique voice to that team as well.
Oh, that's kind of you. Thank you. Yeah, I've been on the Health Commission now for it's our 11th month, and we're in a sea of deadlines. But we're about to finish what has been a very kind of unique and large scale look into health and social care in the UK. So as you can imagine, it has been kind of a really meaty investigation, one that's uncovered so many different issues that need to be addressed. And I think that this is what kind of stands my I think perhaps it has offered an opportunity for a bit of kind of solution journalism, which is very different from kind of news reporting. News reporting, you can identify a problem or identify a discussion, and that's it, and you can leave it, and you can file and you can walk away. But what we're doing is we're not only identifying the problems. We've covered so many different areas, from public health and obesity to cancer. We're doing health inequalities at the moment and mental health. Once you've identified the problems and the scope of those problems, you're then able to speak with experts, create sessions where they can give evidence to try and find not only kind of reputable solutions, but also cost-effective solutions. And that's what we're working on. So I'm working alongside an amazing team of 2 other women, and Claire Bithell is a brilliant policy advisor, and Rachel Sylvester, who I'm sure some of you know, she's a political journalist, and she's the chair of the commission, and we're working with a series of experts in the industry to try and craft a list of recommendations that are cost effective for a healthy reform of health and social care. We're kind of fighting for equity within social care to get that more considered a more recognised sector as it isn't so far. And we'll be making recommendations that hopefully will influence policy. So it's quite a big scope, and yeah, we're creating content that's not only we're publishing brilliant investigations on the back of it, but they're also accessible, which is something that I'm really I don't want to say passionate. I am passionate about creating accessible news for people, and we've had the utter thrill of being able to publish outside of the paywall so everyone can read and access our content. And in January, we'll be publishing a big report that will list all our recommendations, that will include case studies and our findings. So yeah, it's a really exciting time.
Sounds fantastic. And you mentioned a bit about obviously having people with different experiences, and I know a big thing that you've been kind of working on as well is around diversity. And why do you think it is important that the media becomes much more diverse than it currently is? What do you think about that is really crucial?
I think that having a diverse newsroom has always been important, right? Because this is an ideas industry. I think it's become even more higher up on the agenda over the last sort of 5 years, in particular in the Nationals, because they recognise that the demographics of this country are changing. So we can see in the census that over the last few decades that Britain is changing, and therefore the audience is changing. And so if you want to stay relevant, then it's important that your ideas are coming from the communities that are growing in this country. So that's number one. And there's various initiatives, really exciting stuff that's kicking off. For example, Ellie and Son Showbiz have just this week launched a new apprenticeship in partnership with the MOBO Awards to cover music of Black origin much more, because artists from that industry are hugely popular across the spectrum. So number one, our job ultimately is to get the biggest audience we possibly can, and you can only do that by authentically telling stories. And number two, in this age of social media, you're far more accountable than you perhaps were when I first started. And so in order to make sure that your reports are accurate and well considered from all angles, it's important that you've got not only people in your newsroom that come from a variety of different backgrounds that can flag stuff before it goes to publication, but also that you create the kind of environment where they feel they can flag stuff and they can talk to their managers and they can come up with ideas. And so that is important. And going back to where that's relevant for you, you know, as we mentioned, Georgia has been open about, you know, about some of her disabilities, and that's seen, you know, that there are lots of brilliantly talented people who applied for the Times apprenticeship. I think we got somewhere in the region of 600 to 700 applications. But when you're open about who you are and what you would bring, it helps the hiring manager, the editor, start to picture where they would place you in their team. And so, you know, as journalists, you're taught to write what you know to start off with, and the story that you know best is the story of you. And so I would encourage you, as much as you feel comfortable, to talk about the story of you in your cover letter. I think a great cover letter, again, rule of threes maybe, but I think a great cover letter starts with blowing smoke up the arse of wherever you're applying, as we've already covered, because journalists have enormous egos and paper thin skin, apart from these two, who have a lot of humility. So just, yeah, you're amazing. I love this writer. I love that campaign, yada, yada. Then the next bit is to perhaps set up a problem that a newsroom that you're applying for may or may not be aware of. That could be lack of diversity in newsroom. It could be it's harder than ever to reach young audiences. And that allows you in the third bit to then talk about yourself, which you need to do in a good cover letter, but in a way that positions yourself as a solution to that editor's problem. So I come from this background, and I feel like I'm passionate about these subjects, and I feel like I could cover them in a really authentic way. Or I'm a young journalist, and I'm really au fait with how to tell stories on TikTok and what have you. Like, tell the story of you in that cover letter, because I see so many cover letters that say, I'm a team player, but I also work well on my own, and I'm punctual, and everyone's all of those things. Like, talk about what makes you different, and that's what gets people excited. Then they start to picture you in their team and think about all of the brilliant ideas that you're going to bring to them.
And I mean, is there some applications that you've seen over the last few years where somebody's done that in a really imaginative or way that's kind of stuck with you? Is that kind of what you're looking for, something that makes you think a few hours later, oh yeah, that person actually, when I think about what they put down or what they've done, I can really see what I can do with that?
I don't know about these two and their applications, but my application to Sun apprenticeship scheme 18 years ago had a picture. I mocked up a Sun front page, and I had this picture where a firework had gone off behind me, and it looked like it was coming out of my ear. And I put this picture in that said, my head's bursting with ideas. And now I look back and I'm like, that was fucking mental. What were you doing? Like, so I don't think, I don't think you necessarily, like, if it went down well and they liked it, but like, it's quite niche. So I don't think you need to like think big. I think you can easily communicate like your passion for that place through words. You don't necessarily need to show, but I don't know, it worked for me. And then when I came to the application process, we went to uni together. I don't know whether you want to admit that or not. But I had stayed on to be the student newspaper, and it just happened that I'd modelled the student newspaper I was the editor of on the Sun. So like when it came to applying for the Sun, I was like, look, I absolutely love what you do, and that came across loud and clear. So I don't think you need to be quite as keen perhaps as I was, but like definitely just coming across as passionate and coming across like that is really, really important. So yeah. But these two have got far more successful careers, so I would definitely take their advice over mine.
Just to come back to you a second, Elliot, can you tell us a bit what it's like being a showbiz correspondent then? Is it all glitz and glamour, or is it a bit more up and down than that?
No, although to be fair, before we came on, Georgia was like, he's got lots of deadlines. She's like, what have you been? I've just had a 3-hour lunch. I mean, that is the world of a showbiz reporter. But my job is really varied. I don't have a 9 to 5. So my day normally starts around 6 a.m. where I'll wake up and just triple check that our big editor hasn't emailed me, because sometimes you can wake up to a really early email, and I'm a keynote still, so I like to fire one straight back. But then the first thing I'll be doing is looking straight on our website, our rivals' websites, just making sure that before I've even got out of bed, I'm up to speed. And then I'm reading as much as I can, listening as much as I can on the way into work. So even though I'm just showbiz, I always like to have a good grounding of exactly what's going on in the world, because also it gives me an idea of what sense of the newspaper is going to be like. So at the minute, obviously, with what's going on in Israel, it's obviously been dominating news, as it should. But as a showbiz reporter, my job is to bring some light to the shade. So depending on the news events of the day, I'll be able to work out quite early doors. I have an idea what the big editor will be looking for from us. And so every day we compile a list, and normally of 7 to 8 exclusives, and we do that 6 days a week. And that's just for print. So it's constant content creation. So normally you come in, if it's me doing ideas and conference, you go in, you pitch your features ideas to the editor, see what she likes, come out, prepare for news conference and go in. And then my favourite part is when I get to go in and you watch them plot the newspaper. I don't think I'll ever find that boring. I just find it so interesting, and I love to see people's arguments of what goes where. I find that fascinating. But after that, my day could play off. If we place nothing and it's a really quiet day, I'll go and meet contacts. So today I had a 3-hour lunch with a really good contact of mine. They bring me a lot of stories in. And my job is mainly a lot about relationships. So I do a lot of lunches, a lot of dinners. I spend hours. One of my contacts we never get to really hang out. We don't live too close to each other. But I normally speak to that person on the phone every single day, 7 days a week, at least for half an hour a day. I speak to that person more than I speak to my parents, to my friends, because that person is ultimately incredibly valuable to me as the contact, because they bring in some amazing stories. So yeah, lots of lunches. When I'm on deadline, I'm busy, but I think my job is so much more relationships, fluidity. I don't spend a huge amount of time writing. A lot of mine is just story gathering, bringing it in. And I hate writing, so I just write it as quickly as I can. And then in the evenings, events, drinks, going out to meet people again. Often the older I get, the more I just like to go home because I'm tired. But then, yeah, again, depending on the news cycle, so this weekend I worked Saturday and Sunday. I worked Saturday to help out the Sunday paper. And Sunday I was editing showbiz for the daily. But so for example, for Saturday, it was just a story I was interested in. And I think the Sunday paper know that I just love what I do, and I'm just a nosy bitch. Basically, I've got the best job in the world because I'm paid to just be a nosy cow. It's great. So on Saturday morning, I spent 4 or 5 hours working some stuff out, just because you love the job. And I think when you love the job, you want to work. And obviously I do. Obviously I switch off and I do try and take time away. But it's really difficult, especially in showbiz. Like it's all relationships. It's never ending. But that's any sort of news cycle. The news cycle never ends. So you're always sort of on. I do, when I have downtime, I have a lot of downtime. But then it sort of makes up for the times when, you're working non-stop. Like for Philip Schofield, for example, I worked so hard on that story. I gave myself a stress migraine. And I actually had to go and see a doctor because I just got the worst migraine of my life. And I still had to work through this migraine. And I did have to do a couple of days from home. So I could barely see. It was awful. And that was a whole month of my life gone. I worked 7 days a week endlessly on that story. And it was so worth it. And obviously my stress migraine did go. But I just think in this job, you just take every story as it comes and just run with it. And so that's a sort of tiny snapshot of my day. No day is the same. But that's why I love this job. Some days it'll be mental. And then other days it'll be really quiet. You can have a nice 3-hour lunch, nip on and have a chat with you guys. And then I'm going to an award ceremony tonight. But I realised I haven't got any smart clothes, so I'm literally going in this horrible denim jacket. And I was going to stand at the back and hope nobody looks at me.
Can I just ask a quick question, Ellie? I remember on my first day in the newsroom, my mentor said to me, "Congratulations, you've got a front row ticket to the world." And I didn't really appreciate at the time what that meant. And when I look back, I've done like some ridiculous stuff, like traveled the world and met loads of celebrities and stuff like that. And it is a ridiculously fun job. Like, what is the most like superstar pinch me moment that you've had in your career, do you think?
I mean, I'm incredibly sad. And I've met like big superstars like Harry Styles, Madonna, like who have I interviewed? I've interviewed Robbie Williams quite a lot. Like I've done some cool things, but Mick Hucknall, my eyes don't exist in that picture because I was like this. And I wore a dress. I never wear dresses. And he went, "Oh, I love your dress." And I was like, "I love you. Marry me." Genuinely, before I went in, the PR was like, "You're not going to be a fangirl, are you?" And I was like, "No." And I was completely professional, so professional. Even when we left, I didn't even ask for the picture. The PR was like, "Oh, by the way, like she's like a huge fan." And I was like, "Damn." From Mick Hucknall, if you'd have told me, like little girl me, that I would get to spend an hour with Mick Hucknall in the Langham in a suite, just the two of us, no PRs. And that's what I loved about it. They were just like, sometimes you sort of sit on a call with someone and they've got like 3 PRs in the room and you think, "Oh, fuck off and do something else." Like, we're not going to ask them something terrible, you know. But me and Mick, and he touched my leg. And I was like, "Oh, Mick." Yeah, that's proper sad, but it is a window on the world. Like my job is, I've flown all over the world. I've been to places I'd never be able to afford to go. Like, I never have to queue anymore. My mum hates it. She's like, "Oh, you're such a knob." But you never have to queue. And it's amazing. And I always sort of say we get quite a good expenses budget at the Sun. Hopefully that continues. And occasionally I might treat my friends to a drink or dinner. And I always say to them, one day this will stop. Like, I am so aware. And I think maybe that's what makes me work so hard, is that I always think, shit, one day someone might turn that tap off and like this could all end tomorrow. So I was just going to work really hard and take every single perk as it comes, because either they'll sack me or I'll just wither up and die because I'm so tired. But I just think, yeah, it is. And that's such an amazing thing that someone said to you, Mark, 'cause it's so true. And I think that my friends, they all have, like, lots of them have amazing jobs. Their jobs are so fucking boring. And although my job can be mad, sometimes I'll just sort of be like, "Oh, what did you do this afternoon?" Spent an hour with Robbie Williams. You know, "What did you do?" "Oh, I took some, I did a meeting," and I was like, now I'm going to the pub and I'm being paid for it. I got paid to go to the pub. It's amazing. Obviously we're very sensible here, but yeah, I just think, yeah, that I think that's what drives me to work hard, is just, yeah, thinking that it could all stop. And I think use that enthusiasm when you get your foot in the door. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I always think it's so good to say to yourself, just do everything, take every chance that's given to you, because one day you might meet Mick Hucknall and your colleagues might put it on a hot water bottle for you so you can hold him close to you every day. I'm not insane, by the way. I'm not insane. I just not.
Right, we're just going to go to a few questions from the audience.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Georgia. Hi, Ellie. So, talking of apprenticeships, I applied for the London apprenticeship with Times Radio just recently. Sadly, I didn't get it. But I'm doing things the other way around. I'm getting work experience first. I'm at the Bradford Community Radio Station, and I'm a presenter/reporter. And I'm considering doing an MA in journalism. Do I need an MA in journalism to get into Times Radio, or what could you recommend? How do I do it?
Oh, I'm gonna like this.
George, do you want to go?
Ellie, you can.
I would say don't waste your money.
Yeah, so would I.
Do not.
MAs are great. MAs.
Oh no, of
Right.
course they are.
Yeah, yeah.
Go for it. I started to do an MA because I didn't do work experience like you. Like you sound like you've already kicked off to a great start. You're already doing stuff. One rejection, apply for others. Keep pushing. Don't let that rejection make you think, shit, I should do something else. No. Dig your heels in and keep trying. I started an MA because I sort of had the same thing as you. I was like, shit, like I don't really feel like I'm getting anywhere. And I had to drop out because ultimately I was like, why am I doing an MA in political communications at Goldsmiths? Like, yeah, well, obviously, and I love politics. I find it very interesting, but I was trying to work part-time and I just couldn't do it. And in the end, I had to drop out and I went back to where I was before. And I'm not saying you would do that. I'm just saying no one I work with has a master's in journalism. None of them. And they are some of the most talented journalists in the industry. And that's not just here, that's my friends at the BBC, ITN, Sky, people that are really, really talented. So you don't need it unless you think it would help you. If you have the raw skills and the stuff that makes you stand up from the crowd, if you like asking questions and you're a good communicator and you're a good people person, keep plugging away and keep pushing would be my advice. If you want to do an MA in it, absolutely go for it. But I would personally say it sounds like you're on the right path already. So I would keep plugging away. Don't take that rejection or maybe a few other rejections as I'll never make it. Just keep going. That's my 2 cents.
And I would also add that if you have those hiring managers or whoever at Times Radio, take them out. I mean, find them on LinkedIn and ask them if they want to have a coffee, and talk to them about their career. I mean, I've done that with a number of people that have got in contact with me on LinkedIn. And even if it is just offering a bit of insight into what skills may be needed or what, they may know if there's an opening that's not an apprenticeship, that's actually a job. And if you've already had the work experience, is it in Bradford, were you saying? If you've already got that experience, it might be enough. But yeah, just ask.
Shengul Mustafa is the person to contact at Times Radio for that coffee that George has just recommended. So shengul.mustafa at times.radio, I think it is. I can't remember the last bit of their email. But yeah, are you doing the BA here? You're not a student here. Oh, is this for everyone? I thought this was just for students.
Outside, yeah.
So I do think that, and I'm not like paid to say this, but this is one of the unis that is really, really good. And I think the key, whether it's a master's or a BA with an NCTJ, or whether it's the apprenticeship, I think that the NCTJ is a really, really good thing to have because it just gives you all the foundation of everything you need. Georgia mentioned earlier, you learn law, you learn ethics, you learn PA, you learn how to tell a story in written, broadcast and all that sort of stuff. So Ellie's right in that, if you're passionate, you can definitely get in. And our apprenticeships are, we offer, you work 4 days a week and then 1 day a week you would go to college to study your NCTJ and we pay for that. Georgia should have done that, but she was already qualified, I think. You already had your NCTJ.
Yeah, I did.
And we liked her. So again, with a lot of you you're already studying. Don't let that put you off applying for our apprenticeships because if you're talented, we will make adjustments like we did with Georgia. So, if you feel like you're applying for stuff and you're still not getting there, that MA may be a way to continue moving forward and buy you that year to carry on your development. You don't necessarily need it, but I just think an NCTJ accredited qualification is a really, really good foundation. But then wherever you go, these brilliant lecturers have just taught you the basics. Like the Sun will want you to do things in a certain way that is totally different from how the Times do it, and it's totally different from how BBC do it. So, it's impossible for any uni to teach you exactly how to be a journalist. You're still going to be very, very junior when you start out. But also, like Ellie says, as long as you've got passion, that's the thing that they're looking for. So the qualification is great for you and your confidence, but it's not the be all and end all as well.
Do you think that trust for mainstream media is under threat, especially with competition from social media and independent news sources?
That's a big question.
Georgia? Or,
I mean, you're ready to answer this.
I mean, we are under threat. Of course we are. But are they verified sources? Probably not. I do think GB News is an interesting competitor because they are now in the mainstream media. I think they came across to lots of their detractors. And actually, you could tell the establishment was shaken up by that because it's been so rare that people outside of, say, the Sun, the Mail, the Times, Telegraph, the BBC, ITV and Sky have seen actually a good competitor come forward and give the public something different. But in terms of social media and whether, no, because I think we're governed by such a strict set of laws. And I think the one thing a mobile phone has given people is anyone can be a journalist now. Wherever you are in the world, you see that a lot in war zones, the major incidents that happen, everyone can become a journalist. And that's amazing because it's giving everybody a platform. But I also think you have to be really careful about the spread of misinformation. And that is something that is rife on social media. You've seen, companies like Facebook, Meta, for example, trying to crack down on that and stopping the spreading of fake news. I remember there was that huge thing of fake news. And it's because they're not restricted and governed like we are. We, the Sun, the Times are exactly the same, BBC, we all adhere to a really strict set of codes and guidelines that we have to adhere to. I think it's so important for the mainstream media to be challenged, to have competitors. Like, for example, GB News, a great example of a station that, although people might not agree with it, actually it's shaking up the narrative and it's giving people a different option. I think we're all for that. But I do think that you have to be really, really careful with citizen journalism, because ultimately you sort of see it on, especially with Twitter, naming, for example, the Bulger killers. It's a bit grim. But, sometimes you'll see their names spread and you think people write libelous when everyone was trying to guess an anonymous story. Every single time you name, that's libel. You could be done for that. And then people don't realise. And then suddenly you're in trouble and you've got some lawyers emailing you or you're getting some sort of stern letter through the door. Yeah, I think you do have to be really wary. And I don't think people realise how strict governance we operate under until you come into it and you see. So I don't think it worries the mass media at all. But I think it's the spread of misinformation is really difficult. And that's something as a news brand at the Sun, we try and counter all the time. Because obviously verification of stories can sometimes be incredibly difficult. There was the great example of when the Hamas and the Israel, what's happening there. And that's the story that came straight out that said that the hospital and the bomb and the number of people it had killed and who had set this bomb off. And I remember seeing the BBC did it straight out as Hamas said it was Israel. And then everyone was going, well, how can you verify it? And the verification of breaking news is so difficult. It's so hard, especially with breaking news. But for example, for the Sun, especially with the paper, that verification is God to us. And we obviously adhere to the rules and the regulations we work under. So we have to verify things before we can put them out there. They have to be true. They have to be right. The people we're writing about have to be given a right to reply. There has to be, a legal conversation around it. And I think if you're just a citizen journalist out there, you're not adhered to by any laws. I just think you have to trust the mainstream media, is what I'm trying to say, I think, in a very garbly way.
And we get consistent media training on the job as well. So you'll always be invited, I think it's annual, to media training. To kind of, to keep those the legal processes kind of at the forefront of your mind when you report.
Massively, and ethics as well, and the rules and the guidelines. It's something we always look at, and it's a conversation I have with our lawyers, lovely Justin and Adam and Ollie, constantly. You're breaking privacy laws all the time. So it's something that you are constantly reminded about. But yeah, it's a fascinating question, and it's a really good idea. But for me, I think, I don't know, I just get so scared about the spread of misinformation. My boyfriend, for example, is an electrician, lovely lad. Oh my God, he gets all his news from TikTok and so much of it is fake news. And he's like, why aren't you covering this? Because it's not right, you div. That's why. But it's so simple. And I'm not saying he's a complete bonehead. He's quite an intelligent person. But I think if someone can be hoodwinked so easily by fake news, it's crazy. And I think I use him as an example of how how dangerous it is sometimes to get your news from unverified sources, because it's bollocks half the time. Sorry.
And I think the last thing I'd say as well is like one of the big things that I think has sort of chipped away at trust in mainstream media recently has been COVID and how COVID was reported. And I think there's a big chunk of people that felt as if their opinions and their feelings around COVID wasn't being reported. And there's lots of reasons for that. And it's why that the British media industry needs to reflect a widespread of opinions. We were talking earlier about some of the stations and some of the titles that are out there that perhaps you lot don't agree with personally, and that's absolutely fine. But it's so important that there is this broad range across the media so that those opinions are out there and they're properly discussed and analysed and verified. Like, there's no better bleach than sunlight, is the saying, and what have you. So when it comes back to you guys, there's lots of different outlets out there, and I think social media has made lots of different news sites for your particular interest group. You know, Novara Media is absolutely amazing and probably wouldn't have existed 10 years ago before social media, and they're doing some really interesting stuff. Lots of these sites that are coming up now, they have an opinion, they have an agenda, as do many other titles in mainstream media, but it's important that we have that ecosystem, that there are places that people feel as if the stories that matter to them are being looked at. It's the reason why I always wanted to work at The Sun, because I grew up working class, I grew up in a council estate, and I never felt as if the stories that mattered to me and my friends were being reported anywhere else apart from The Sun. So, you know, while Ellie has been lovely and entertaining about showbiz and stuff like that, those stories matter to a lot of people. You know, a lot of people care about UK celebrities and shows that they love, and they come to The Sun every single day because of those stories, and they can trust those stories because they've been written by brilliant journalists and they've been checked, and it's really, really hard to write stuff about celebrities that you have to be so sure that story is true. And so at the minute there's a lot of questions around mainstream media, and that's entirely right. It's important that us journalists don't get lazy and that we are held accountable by the audiences, and I think there's definitely ways that we can improve, but I think that pendulum will swing back soon enough. You know, we've got a lot of technological advances coming up. We've got AI and deep fakes. There's going to be a lot of stuff out there, and I think people will want to go back to sources of news that they can trust, that they know have abided by rules set by Ipso or Ofcom, and they are printing stuff that is true to the best of their ability. So right now there's a lot of questions being asked, but I think you know, the numbers show that audiences are still going to mainstream media organisations.
Okay, well, I think that's been a really thrilling discussion, and thanks, Mark, Ellie, and Georgia for taking the time, because I know you're all really busy. But I'd like you to thank you, if you can, thank Mark and all of them for appearing here this afternoon.